Chemfuel is now a key resource for moving your precious new Gravship in RimWorld Odyssey. But how much Chemfuel do you need, and what is the best way to make it? Flying anywhere within 5 tiles of your current location costs 50 Chemfuel. Each additional tile costs an extra 10 Chemfuel. Small thrusters add 10 range to your flight distance, and with 4 of them, you can fly 40 tiles for 400 Chemfuel. Each large thruster adds 16 range to your ship. Adding the maximum of 6 large thrusters means you can now fly 136 tiles for 1,360 Chemfuel. I've added this table so you can see the amount of Chemfuel you need for maximum distance journeys, depending on the number of thrusters you have. You can find and add up to 2 fuel optimizers to your ship, which brings the Chemfuel cost down by 30% and then 60%. This is a huge reduction to the Chemfuel cost of flying. In addition to flying, you might have other uses for Chemfuel, such as burning it for power in a Chemfuel generator, or using it in crafting recipes like mortar shells. You'll store the Chemfuel in Chemfuel tanks, but if you want to store additional Chemfuel, you're best off keeping it on shelves, where you can store 450 Chemfuel in one tile. Chemfuel on a shelf cannot be shot by bullets, but it is very vulnerable to fire or grenades. When a Chemfuel tank is damaged below 25% health, it will start to hiss and then explode. You might be doing a lot of exploring across the world map, moving from tile to tile pretty frequently, and you may not have a permanent base until later in the game, or never at all. Alternatively, you might settle a main base the moment you can build a grav anchor, and want to travel out from that base and return. But what are all the ways to get Chemfuel? You can find Chemfuel stashes as loot in certain structures when you explore. You can buy Chemfuel from traders. You can find an infinite chem reactor. You can travel to a glow forest and harvest boom shrooms. You can get boomalopes, which produce Chemfuel. You can process organic material like wood, crops, or meat in a biofuel refinery to output Chemfuel. Finding Chemfuel or buying Chemfuel from traders are both opportunistic. They're worth doing if and when you have the chance. The infinite chem reactor is a building you can get as a quest reward, and it produces 75 Chemfuel every 10 days. It's fun and good to have it, but it's pretty rubbish compared to some of the other methods. The boom shrooms in glow forests can be harvested for 7 Chemfuel. For example, this map had 39 boom shrooms, which would be a bit over 250 Chemfuel once they're fully grown. Unfortunately, they're one of the slowest growing plants in the game, and you can't plant them. Interestingly though, their description does let us know that it's the boom shroom's genetic material that led to boom rats and boomalopes. Not bad to get a bit of extra Chemfuel from them, but it's not something you can build a strategy out of. The biofuel refinery turns 70 organic materials like wood, meat or vegetables into 35 Chemfuel. Let's bring the table of distances back. How many times would we need to put 70 material into the biofuel refinery to produce enough Chemfuel for each flight? Well, 3 uses of the biofuel refinery produces 105 Chemfuel, enough for a 10-tile journey. This would therefore need 210 organic materials. We can then expand this to show all the different distances you might want to travel. One of the easiest ways to get organic materials is to land on a tile and cut down lots of trees. While your grav engine is cooling down and it won't let you fly, your good plant skill colonists can cut down a lot of wood while your other pawns haul it back to the ship and your crafter turns it into Chemfuel. I've worked out roughly how many trees are on some of the more common biomes, and so it's best to land on these if all you need is Chemfuel. In fact, I did get some pawns to cut down every single tree in a flat temperate forest, and it was well over 30,000 wood. Of course, flat maps with less mountains and no big lakes or oceans will have more wood than maps of the same biome that do have those features. You can plant trees, but they grow very slowly, and if you are going to grow anything to turn into Chemfuel, you're better off with crops. You can get meat from hunting. If you land and need some Chemfuel and there's a large herd of buffalo, then it's definitely an option that you've got. But also don't forget that raiders can be processed into Chemfuel too. You can also get meat from other sources, like twisted meat from Anomaly. If you defeat a flesh mass heart and capture the nucleus, you'll get a nice reward of about 120 twisted meat per day. That's not too far off being able to produce 70 Chemfuel a day from just the flesh mass nucleus. Before we look at the crops you can grow, I'd like to cover boomalopes. You get boomalopes by buying them from traders or taming them using a pawn with good animal handling skills. When they're fully grown, they produce 11 Chemfuel per day, which is obtained by milking them. The better your animal handling skill, the smoother the milking process and the less botched attempts you'll have. Boomalopes explode when shot, hit by lightning, meet fire, or if they die. As much as we love them, exploding does make them a bit of a higher risk, especially when, I don't know, you're contained in a small area surrounded by the vacuums of space. Just like with biofuel refining, we can see how many boomalopes we'd need to produce the Chemfuel for each of the journeys. This table shows how many days it would take 1 or 10 boomalopes to produce the Chemfuel you'd need for different journey lengths. You can make boomalopes work in a lot of situations, but in an ideal world, you'll have a safe, walled-in area on a permanent base where your boomalopes can eat the naturally growing vegetation all year round. You can use a pen marker to make sure your boomalopes have enough space to keep themselves fed without any work from your colonists. If you have mixed seasons, you'll want to grow additional crops during the growing season to ensure you have enough food to feed them over winter. If you're in a hostile place where crops are hard to grow outdoors, like a ice sheet, desert, or even an asteroid, you'll need to make greenhouses and/or hydroponic basins to grow crops for your boomalopes. If you do need to feed them with crops, each boomalope requires 0.86 nutrition per day. 1 unit of hay grass or vegetables like rice, corn or potatoes fills up 0.05 nutrition. Therefore, each boomalope requires 17.2 hay grass or vegetables each day. However, they can also eat processed foods like simple meals or baby food. 20 units of vegetables worth 1 nutrition can be processed into 40 baby food, which is worth 2 nutrition. Therefore, you can put in some extra work using your cooking colonists to extend the food supplies by doubling the nutritional output of the vegetables. Boomalopes are more efficient at turning vegetables into Chemfuel than the biofuel refinery, and so I'd definitely recommend them, especially for permanent bases, as long as you're aware and managing the downsides of them exploding. If you don't want to look after boomalopes, then you can grow crops and turn those into Chemfuel. There are a lot of factors to consider here for both crops into the biofuel refinery and crops into boomalopes. These factors both depend on how you want to play. Do you have a permanent base, or are you moving from place to place? And also where you are. Are you in an all-year growing jungle, an ice sheet, a boreal forest, temperate forest, or an asteroid? Therefore, I'm going to keep this simple and just quickly cover each of the crops, and then do another video actually looking at all of the numbers so that this video isn't twice as long. But to summarize, rice grows very fast and is exceptional in hydroponics. If you want to produce Chemfuel on an asteroid, it's a good idea to look at rice in hydroponics. It does require a lot of plant work because planting and harvesting happens very frequently, but that also makes it the safest supply. Corn takes a long time to grow, but has the highest yield of any crop. It cannot be planted in hydroponics. It is best for growing a lot of organic material with as little effort from your planters as possible. This does make it vulnerable to cold snaps or raiders, because if it's destroyed 14 days in, you don't get any organic materials. It's best for all year round growing, so you don't need to worry about cold snaps. Potatoes are a good middle ground. They're less effort than rice, but they're not as risky to grow like corn. If you have a permanent base and you want to grow a lot of crops before winter, so you've got split seasons, then potatoes are a very good option. They're also the least impacted by soil fertility, and so they grow well in poor soil. Strawberries are never best in class, and so are often overlooked, and they're kind of most similar to potatoes by being a middle ground. Strawberries in hydroponics are a good option if you want a little less work than rice, but they don't produce quite as much organic materials. Hay grass cannot be turned into Chemfuel in a biofuel refinery, but it is a good option if you need to stockpile food for boomalopes to eat over winter. However, because you can feed boomalopes baby food or simple meals, it's probably better to grow other crops instead. If you don't want to cook boomalopes meals or baby food, hay grass is a great option. Nutrifungus must grow in the dark, and so it doesn't require a sun lamp to grow inside. This can make it a really good choice in certain scenarios, and the perfect choice if doing a run with the tunnel ideology. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of different ways you can get Chemfuel for your Gravship. If there is anything you'd like me to check, or an idea you think could be a good Chemfuel strategy, then please let me know. Thank you very much for watching.